Pencil of Doom Part 2. We were up to was it Jack's cartoon? Yes, Jack scowled at her. You'll see. Jack stomped up the steps and down the corridor towards our classroom. He was mad. Madder than I'd ever seen him. He went straight to his desk and took out a piece of paper and started drawing. I knew what this meant. Jack was going to draw one of his Fred and Clive cartoons. Whenever the Durkin brothers annoyed him, he always drew a cartoon of something bad happening to them. He divided the page up into a strip of 8 squares and began attacking it with the pencil. He wasn't as much drawing as slashing and stabbing the page. In fact, he was being so violent that he broke his pencil in half. "Can I borrow your pencil, Henry?" he asked. Normally I would have said yes, but I only had one pencil on me, and the last time I lent it to someone, Mr. Brainfright had ended up flying out the window. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think it's a good idea. You seem, well, a little agitated." "I'll get a little more agitated if you don't lend me your pencil," said Jack, his eyes flashing angrily. "I share my stuff with you, don't I?" "Yeah, I guess so," I said, reluctantly getting the pencil out of my pencil case and giving it to Jack. "Just, be careful." Jack nodded. "Okay, Henry," he said. "I won't break this one, I promise." "That's not what I meant," I said. "What did you mean?" I don't really know." Jack shrugged and went back to his cartoon. The skull eraser seemed to grin wider than ever as he worked. Clive entered the classroom. "Who's the dumb one now, then, Jack?" he said as he passed our desks. "You don't even know the difference between no and yes." Jack ignored Clive and kept drawing. Clive stopped. "I thought your arm would have been too sore to draw." "No, it's fine," said Jack, hunching over his drawing so Clive couldn't see it. "Takes more than a girl's punch to hurt me." "Hey," yelled Gretel, "I heard that." "So did I," said Clive, "and I'm going to tell my brother." "Don't you ever get sick of running to your brother and telling him what everybody said?" "No," said Clive, "and I'm going to tell him you said that too." Jack didn't say anything. He didn't say anything for the rest of the afternoon, not even when Clive started flicking chewed-up bits of paper at the back of his neck. Not even when Penny and Gina, the horse-mad twins in our class, went for a canter around the room on their imaginary horses and bumped into his desk, knocking his cartoon to the floor. Instead of getting mad, Jack just picked up the paper, placed it back on his desk and kept drawing. I'd never seen him so engrossed. He drew all through our free reading period, and it was only when the bell rang that he looked up blinking. He picked up his cartoon, stood up and walked over to my desk. "Wow," he said, "that's some pencil, Henry." "Really?" I said. "Why?" "Well, it's going to sound a bit weird," said Jack. "But it was like the pencil was doing all the work. Check it out." Jack passed the cartoon to me. It was called Flying with Fred and Clive. Chapter 8. Flying with Fred and Clive. Frame 1. Fred and Clive flying in a plane. Frame 2. Smoke coming out of the back of the plane. Frame 3. Fred and Clive jumping out of the plane. Frame 4. Fred and Clive trying to open their parachutes. Frame 5. Fred and Clive panicking as their parachutes fail to open. Frame 6. Fred hitting the ground. Frame 7. Clive landing on top of Fred. Frame 8. Plane crashing on top of Fred and Clive. Oh, that sounds painful. Chapter 9. An apology and a threat. "It's incredible, Jack," I said. "It's the best drawing you've ever done. I wasn't just saying it Achoo! Achoo! To be nice. Either. I meant it. It was really good. Something about the detail made the pictures look almost real." "Thanks," said Jack, "but I can't take all the credit. This pencil is great." "That's a cool cartoon, Jack," said Gretel, who, along with Jenny and Newton, had come up behind us. "Serves them both right. And Jack, yes, I'm sorry for teasing you at lunch." "Are you really sorry, or are you just scared that Jack will draw a cartoon of you?" I said. "Both," said Gretel, laughing. "It's really good, Jack," said Jenny, "but I can't help but feeling a little sorry for Fred and Clive." "You feel sorry for them," said Jack. "How about feeling sorry for me? I'm the one who got punched in the arm twice." "I know," said Jenny, "but all the same," she pointed at the final frame of the cartoon, "that must hurt." "So did getting punched in the arm," said Jack. "What's wrong, Newton?" asked Gretel. We looked at Newton. His face was white. He was trying to talk, but no words were coming. "Is it the cartoon?" Jenny asked gently. "Are you scared of Jack's cartoon?" Newton shook his head. "What if," he said, taking a deep breath, "what if Fred and Clive see it?" "That won't happen," said Jack. "Won't it?" We turned around. Clive was standing right behind Jack. He was shaking his head. "My brother's definitely not going to like this," he said. "He's not going to like this at all." "He doesn't have to know," said Jack. "Oh, yes, he does," said Clive, turning and heading off down the corridor as soon as possible. "You know what your problem is, Clive?" Jack shouted after him. "You need to get a life." Clive turned back and smiled. "I've got one," he said. "It's you who's going to need a life when Fred finds out about this." Jack gulped. He looked even more frightened than Newton, and that's not easy to do. Suddenly, flying with Clive and Fred didn't seem quite as funny as it had a few minutes earlier, and it was about to get even unfunnier. In fact, none of us had any idea just how unfunny things were about to get. Chapter 10. Bad News. The next morning, Mr. Brainfright called the class to order. "I'm afraid I've got some bad news," he said. "Oh no," said Gretel. "You're not leaving, are you?" "No, nothing like that," said Mr. Brainfright, assured her. "The school holidays have been cancelled," I suggested. "No," said Mr. Brainfright. "Not quite that bad." "The school holidays have been extended," Fiona gasped. "What would be bad about that?" asked Mr. Brainfright. "I love school," said Fiona. "There's so much to learn and so little time. The more school, the better, as far as I'm concerned." "Ah, yes," said Mr. Brainfright. "I couldn't agree more." But that's not the bad news. The bad news is that Clive and his brother Fred are in hospital. They are both in a very serious condition and may not return to school for quite some time. "What happened?" said Jenny, looking worried. "Well," said Mr. Brainfright, "apparently they were on their garage roof trying to launch a model aeroplane. Fred fell off the roof and then Clive did too and landed right on top of Fred. And then, to add insult to injury, the plane rolled off the roof and crashed on top of Clive." As he was telling us this, some kids started giggling. "Come now, children," said Mr. Brainfright. "It's not funny at all." He was right. It wasn't funny. Newton, Gretel, Jenny, Jack and I stared at each other in open-mouthed astonishment. It was just like Jack's cartoon. Well, give or take a few small details, but the result was the same. I looked out the window and noticed a cloud pass in front of the sun. A sudden wind blew autumn leaves off the tree in a wild flurry. I opened my pencil case and looked at the pencil. The skull winked at me.